I'm finally back. If you're not in the loop, I'm on a new bi-weekly upload schedule instead of weekly, and while it's been doing great for my mentality and, has allowed me to actually have a life, it definitely also drags out the frequency of these reviews to a point that it might be a month until I talk about another one. This video being Exhibit A. That being said, it has allowed me to feel a lot more refreshed between new saves, so it should all work out. Anyways, enough yapping about schedule changes though, let's talk about the pack. Reminiscence is a beta-styled mod pack that's been on my radar since the start of my mod pack reviews. It was on my last vote list for the previous video, however Bali recommended RF instead of this pack, which was a very kind thing to do, so I wanted to respect that move by reviewing the pack anyways, and here we are. Reminiscence is a mod pack that aims to bring the mechanics and gameplay of beta while also bringing the modern creative options that we see today. The pack removes villages and enchanting instead focusing on material-based upgrades, much like other packs of the same vein I've played before, at the same time introducing all the modern new content as well as other mods to further bolster its experience. So now that we have the general premise laid out, is it any good? Stay tuned and find out. Also, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. Or don't, you do you, I'm not your mom. Let's begin this nostalgic adventure with the good. The most prominent thing right away for me in this pack definitely has to be the texture work. The resource pack work is phenomenal. All the modern items and blocks are retextured to better fit the aesthetic the pack is aiming for. Special blocks like the stonecutter even saw a complete revision, looking more akin to its original design. And even though young structures are tossed in here, it appears that thanks to the retexturing, the structures appear more blocky and not as detailed, further cementing that feel the pack aims for. The Aether was added to this pack and also saw some detail changes that better fit things, made especially apparent with the cloud gas things. Are they called gusts by chance? I don't know their names. If you can help me out in the comments, that'd be great. Even the old sound effects have returned, like doors, damage, bows, and explosions having their classic sounds, which I love. Call me nostalgia feel all you want. I'm happy with these sounds. Mechanics have also been successfully betafied, with old combat returning and AI being simultaneously old school, but with some tweaks here and there to improve the threat of some mobs. Sword blocking is back, instant bow shots are back, instant healing through food returned, and even the old lighting system has appeared to have returned. All of these really help solidify that old school identity as it brings the game back to its original indie feel. It's not all just beta content though, as the pack does bring in some new additions to help it stand out on top of its old school design. There's new crops and food recipes thanks to Farmer's Delight, which adds more ways to have food with a high health return. The Inmis backpack mod is here, so we still get expanded inventory space with upgrades. The World Gen saw a return to its former glory with the Wild Mountains and even the Old Nether's World Gen, which if you've watched my previous reviews, you know I adore this old World Gen far more than modern, though that's for personal taste, not me saying modern World Gen is bad. While that mod that introduces the individual Ender Eyes has returned, it also has been tweaked to be a craftable thing, so you're no longer walking aimlessly, for the most part. There's also supplementaries, which has been retextured to fit the aesthetic of the pack as well. There's even sawmills, which honestly should just be a base game thing, because making stairs for both stone and wood should just be a 1-to-1 ratio in some way, shape, or form. Reminiscence does seem to understand its goals and handles it relatively well. Even for an unfinished pack, it's pretty well structured and most of the additions feel very appropriate and thought out. That all being said, I am a critic, and this is an unfinished pack, so it'd be dishonest to not talk about the content experience, so let's talk. Before I continue, please be aware that this pack is deemed unfinished by Bali, and a lot of this is subject to change. While I do like the mod pack, there's a lot of cons that came from it just on that prospect alone. So if I come off as a hard ass, please understand that this is by no means me shitting on the pack, more than it is pointing out things for the sake of improvements down the line. Reminiscence truly shows promise, and I want to give it a nudge in the right direction. Sound good? Aight. The pack seems to be suffering from an identity crisis. In the description of the mod pack, it states that its objective is trying to add that beta gameplay style while having modern creative options, which I think it does accomplish this most of the time, but there's a number of additions that make me raise an eyebrow or even feel like it's just a straight violation of this philosophy. The true ending dragon fight being a prime example of the latter. This is the most un-beta-like gameplay I've ever seen in a beta-styled pack. On its own, this dragon fight mod is typically great in modern gameplay packs. The problem is that with this modern combat being replaced with beta combat, no enchantments, the lack of sprinting, and with no hunger bar health regen, this fight is a terrible addition on a fundamental level. Let me rattle off every single problem with this boss fight. First off, hitting the crystals are now way worse to put up with as your bow no longer has the capacity to launch as far as it used to because it's an instant launching bow instead of a charged one. So in order to hit the crystals, you have to build up or hit trick shots without the special attacks knocking you into fucking Narnia. Second off, without being able to sprint, sometimes you just have to eat the full damage of the improved dragon attacks. Even even though healing is instant, you can't stack any food you want, so you have an incredibly limited amount of time to top off healing. Thirdly, the dragon's health was not nerfed to compensate for the player's now lack of damage, and the true ending dragon fight actively buffs its base health. The dragon's health is designed for enchanted gear, of which we cannot have, so this dragon fight takes eons to actually beat. And then the last issue with the dragon fight is how wildly it violates the beta gameplay style. This is a complicated, structured, epic fight with hard-coded attacks and sequences, which, last I checked, I wasn't receiving Mortal Kombat fatalities by a fucking creeper in beta. Due to its inherently elaborate nature, it violates that beta feel of simplicity by adding a whole lot of complication that's available nowhere else in the game but this exact fight. Too Long Didn't Listen, this Ender Dragon fight doesn't work because of the fact that the core mechanics got beta-fied while the Dragon Fight mod was entirely designed around modern mechanics. It doesn't belong here and I'd remove it entirely. Another strange detail that stuck out to me was the complete and utter removal of the term End from this pack. Endstone got renamed, the Ender Dragon is just called Dragon, and the eyes are under Voidscapes. The End had a name change to being the Void, and while that does make sense, the issues I have with this is the fact that it's still the End. It's got better End mod. It's got better Ender Dragon fight. It's got Ender Men. While I appreciate the retexturing that's done to a lot of the blocks, it doesn't change the fact that this is still the End, which I personally think the End as a concept tends to undermine any feelings of beta gameplay in the slightest. Also, why even rename it at this point? Seems kind of redundant. Before I continue into my next complaint, I do have to kind of preface what beta is about because most of the audience for Minecraft now is people who didn't get to play the beta, so I kind of have to, explain that for people who didn't experience it. Beta Minecraft was always known as a sandbox experience with no boss fights or epic journey required. It lacked goals, which in turn incentivized the player to make their own. The player didn't have a boss fight, the player didn't have any of that. It was just like, hey, empty world, build what you want. And you just were like, oh, I'll build a castle. And that basically summed up the entirety of the beta experience. It really was just collect resource, build house. That was it. It may seem silly, but this is why beta was loved in the first place. It was just simple. It was simple fun. So with that idea in place and understanding that Reminiscence is based on this, you could probably understand how the new eyes and inherently removing the sandbox mentality in place of a goal is objectively a problem. Now instead of an intrinsic goal like building a castle or building a huge city, now there's an actual extrinsic goal, a goal put in place for you. Get to the Void, kill a dragon, and win. Now, it is worth noting that Bali has stated that anything regarding the End is pretty much unfinished at the time of this recording, but since I still experienced it at the time of me playing it, I still had to bring it up. More of the identity crisis situation comes in with the Aether as well, as it too includes boss fights. Aether does feel a little bit more friendly though, because it's a mod that's been around for ages, and the old textures of the Aether do feel very beta friendly, so it's not the most egregious thing in the world despite what it adds, but the notion of bosses does add a non-internal objective that players will likely focus on instead of building cool stuff, which beta is all about. Next on the chopping block, some of the textures are kinda questionable. There's many times where a block is legitimately just a recolored texture of an existing texture. For example, any form of shroom light was retextured to a recolored version of glowstone. Why? Also, some of the retextured stones in the End are literally recolors of nether blocks, and I get the idea that retexturing the entire game and mod content is definitely not an easy task, and I don't fault Dr. Bruh Moments, the texture's creator, for having to maybe cut a couple corners either. Deep Slate even makes sense to me, because I'm pretty sure beta Minecraft would have 100% just made it a darker cobblestone texture, so that makes sense. But it does ultimately feel weird to see blocks with once a very distinct design getting dunked into a photocopier. I mean, even the sounds of digging them up reflects this, as instead of the glass sounds that you'd expect from a glowstone texture, it has a far more biological and fleshy sounding, sound, which because of the sound, further exacerbates just how weird it is to see a glass-like texture on a flesh object. Another issue I have is the fact that, we can't sprint, but we still have to go to a stronghold, so unless you have a horse or a boat, you're gonna be spending hours going thousands of blocks away just to find the end of the game. I mean, depending on world gen, of course, because as per usual, my luck decided to put its foot up my ass, and it ended up putting the stronghold about 6,000 blocks away from my house. Great. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but more time consuming is definitely not better. The pack also makes a lot of modern combat experiences inherently harder to deal with. Not horrible, except arguably the Ender Dragon, but definitely frustrating in situations usually involving a certain calcium constructed friend. Also, while I get the appeal of new materials and tools, there definitely feels like far too many new armor types. With the Aether sets, tungsten, copper, bismuth, it kinda makes the whole armor and tools pool feel rather bloated. Now, all of them still serve a utility, so they're definitely not pointless, but it can be daunting, especially since you have no idea how durable these items actually are. I didn't find out how utterly fragile bismuth gear was until I made a pickaxe and saw its durability tank on one singular block break. It's got vein mine, so I get its purposes like ore excavation, but if that's the case, then why even humor the armor? I mean, it's strong, but getting it broken by a gust of wind doesn't exactly sit right with me, especially since you have to go to the void to even get it in the first place. My last criticism I have is actually about surface structures. I think surface structures are not a good fit for beta styled packs. The whole feel and aesthetic of beta is that the world was damn near empty and void of any signs of surface civilization. This made the world feel lonely, but at the same time the world felt like yours. It's what makes its sandbox vibe feel so great, because you're filling an empty world with your creations. However, I get the fun of dungeon diving, so let me suggest an alternative. Swap surface dungeons with underground ones. Leaving the surface empty instills that filling an empty world feel, while having dungeons underground greatly bolsters that subtle notion that you weren't the first one to arrive here. Just a thought, I know my opinion doesn't speak for everyone. Other than these details though, these are really the only cons I walked away with, so time for overall thoughts. Despite the cons I ended up walking away with, this pack was still a joy to play, and honestly, I have high hopes for it to be completed. The experience was pretty good, and honestly, I think it deserves more eyes on it. Go play it. Bali, this pack is rather solid and shows promise. I cannot wait to see what you come up with and what changes are introduced with time. Nice work, and keep it up. With that being said, that concludes the review, so it's time for another Modpack vote. Your options are Musketeer, Vault Hunters 3, and Better Than Wolves. Remember to leave a comment of what your vote is, otherwise it doesn't count. Also worth noting that a major change to my content is happening soon, so keep your eyes peeled for when that announcement drops. This has been the Bond Dweller. See you in a couple weeks.